The 107th Engineer Company joined Fahl-Blau, the 1942 German campaign in the Soviet Union, as a unit of Hungarian Second Army. Its commander, First Lieutenant László Bártfai Szabó, described the fate of this unit in his book, which was eventually published shortly before the fall of the communist regime in 1988. This miniseries is based on his description, revealing the challenges and difficulties he and his men had to face as they retreated from the River Don towards safety in early 1943. The year before, in early 1942, First Lieutenant Bártfai Szabó was the commanding officer of 3rd Company of 9th Engineer Battalion, a unit directly subordinated to 9th Corps in northern Transylvania. At the time, each army corps had such a unit, but the German demand to increase Hungary's participation in the war forced another reorganization. Some units would join 2nd Army that was leaving for the Eastern Front, while others would stay behind and continue their peacetime routine. In May, he was ordered by the Minister of Defense to join 19th Light Division to gain frontline experience before he would commence his studies at the military academy in Budapest. His main duty was to send unbiased reports on the division's condition, especially when it came to organizational, training and supply matters, along with the soldiers' morale. He saw that the division was exposed in its position at the Don due to the overextended lines and a lack of modern equipment, especially heavy anti-tank guns. In an article that was published back home, he implied that the line would hold until a major attack took place. After a few months, in November 1942, when the weather suddenly turned very cold, he was ordered to take over the 107th Engineer Company, which was subordinated to the 151st Motorized Engineer Battalion under 7th Corps at the southern edge of 2nd Army's section at the front. He was to head this unit until the 1st of February, but events would soon take another turn. The 107th Engineer Company had participated in the battles for the remaining Soviet bridgeheads at the Don in August and September, then moved to Goncharovka with 4 engineer platoons, 1 machine gun platoon, and the supply train. It had 7 officers, 320 enlisted men. The unit's morale and cohesion were intact. By November, their main duties were the maintenance of roads and the raising of obstacles, helping 23rd Light Division, whose neighbor on the right was the Italian Alpini Corps. Even though Italian 8th Army had already been attacked in December, Christmas and New Year's Eve were both peaceful, and no orders arrived to prepare for combat or a retreat. Chief of the General Staff, Ferenc Szombathely, simply ordered all units to firmly hold their positions. On the 16th of January, First Lieutenant Bártfai Szabó received orders to move his company from Goncharovka to Alexeyevka Nikolayevka to strengthen the defense works at 2nd Army's HQ. On their march, they heard explosions in the distance, indicating the movements of Kramer Corps that was covering its own retreat instead of a counterattack to stop the Soviet breakthrough. On the way, in Matreno-Jeshevo, they ran into retreating units, who informed them that after 4 days of the initial attack, several divisions had suffered heavy losses, and that Alexeyevka had already been taken by Soviet tanks and infantry. Still, they continued their march on the 18th of January without any further orders or guidance from their superiors. 7 officers, 320 men, 38 sleighs, and their 76 horses, along with 2 motor vehicles, constituted the company, altogether for the last time. Just before reaching the town, which 2nd Army's HQ had actually abandoned 2 days before, they heard gunfire and explosions. The other retreating units that were ahead of them showed up on the road, fleeing in complete panic, smashing into each other as they were trying to get away from the fire zone. First Lieutenant Bártfai Szabó quickly ordered his men off the road to let the disorderly crowd leave without dragging his own men with them. He ordered the company to watch and learn from this, to see how panic and a lack of order can turn soldiers into a mob. They watched in horror, then moved to a nearby group of houses that were protected from enemy fire by a railway embankment. There, they waited the inevitable attack by the previously seen 8 Soviet tanks and their supporting infantry. Luckily, Hungarian armor soon showed up, elements of 1st Armored Field Division, with motorized infantry, with the goal of breaking through the town and move toward Budyonny, today's Birjuch, the next major settlement to the west. 2 Nimrod tank hunters started shelling the town with their Bofors guns, while another 5 tanks crawled up to them, followed by the engineers, who covered them against enemy infantry in the narrow streets, removing mines and other obstacles. Alexeyevka was held only by a small Soviet contingent, so they could not stop larger retreating forces. The breakout succeeded. The fighting lasted 2 hours, during which a tank was lost. Its crew escaped the vehicle, still wearing their burning uniforms, using the snow to douse the fire. Once the town was behind them, the engineers stayed with the tanks, but their speed was not more than 5 kilometers per hour due to the dark and the slippery icy road. They had 20 wounded, around 25 missing, including 3rd Lieutenant Rul, which was a serious loss, but they reached Budyonny before midnight, where Major Kasás from 23rd Light Division welcomed them and briefed 1st Lieutenant Bártfai Szabó, while Major Gombos from 151st Engineer Battalion, their own parent unit, provided some badly needed provisions and new orders to strengthen and guard the eastern edge of the town, through which remnants of 12th and 19th Light Divisions were retreating. These units had been smashed and were barely able to continue the march westwards after 6 days of fighting in the extreme cold, which sometimes reached -45 degrees Celsius. The following day, on the 19th of January, 3rd Lieutenant Rul showed up unexpectedly, to everybody's astonishment. 3 witnesses had stated that they had seen him being mowed down in Alexeyevka by a Soviet machine gun, but he explained that he saw the MG in the last moment and quickly fell on the ground, so the bullets only hit his snowcap. He pretended to be dead for a few hours, so his face had the marks of frostbite, but then he joined other retreating troops once the crew of the MG had moved on. The number of confirmed dead was now reduced to 8, while Budyonny was being evacuated as Soviet troops were approaching from the east and north. I should also mention that the engineers were quite impressed by the Soviet soldiers' morale and ferocity. One of them remembered seeing a machine gun crew that kept firing until they were all dead, never leaving their weapon. Another saw a Soviet soldier that had lost one arm, but still kept firing his SMG while lying on the ground, slowly bleeding to death. Various units were waiting for the green light to leave the town, but the 107th Engineer Company would join them only a day later, on the 20th of January, leaving behind a single platoon as the rearguard. This unit was led by 3rd Lieutenant Rul, while the other 3 platoons, the remaining 28 sleighs, each with 2 horses, and the 2 motor vehicles started their march to Novi Oskol. They had acquired plenty of provisions from the supply depots that were marked for destruction, but they also scavenged food, weapons, and ammunition from abandoned vehicles along the road. As always, the motor vehicles with the filled kitchen were sent ahead in order to have warm food by the time the unit arrived in the next village. It would be a slow and dangerous retreat to the new defense line that ran along the Oskol Valley. After another slow march with low visibility and lots of traffic on the only available road, they reached Ninovka, a small village that had a German unit in it. Luckily, they found a small kolkhoz, a former state farm, so they could eat and rest a few hours. They had marched 120 kilometers in 4 days, which was no small feat in the cold. They had plenty of butter, sugar, and flour, so they could barter with the locals for vegetables, potatoes, and even smaller animals. Still, they were far from being safe, and the most difficult part of the retreat was still ahead of them, although they did not know that yet. In the next episode, we will see what was awaiting for them.